to address the concerns about cancer?
Yeah, well, first of all, this is a serious issue. It's an issue that affects every Iowan, directly, indirectly, and it's critically important that we get to the bottom of what's going on. We're not in a good place as a state, and I think what I just want to see is let's have a comprehensive look at that. I appreciate the work that's been done with DHS, University of Iowa College of Public Health on looking into causes. I think this is. I think what we know is that this is more complex than what some want to make it, and I think you've got some who have decided that it's a political issue, and I think that can be very dangerous, is when we start to go down this path of just automatically blaming somebody or blaming farmers, for instance, when we really need to understand what are the root causes and then go address those. I think a young farmer that I visited with, look, I travel this state extensively. I thought this young man put it very well, which is frustration about being accused of putting his head in the sand. When he farms, he's got a young family, and then to be accused of not caring or not getting it or not being concerned, and his comment was, wouldn't I be first in line to want to know if something that's happening on the farm is affecting health negatively? And we need to make sure that we're following where the science, where the information takes us. And I think it's okay to wonder, to ask questions, to want to know the causes. That's where we need to go. But let's actually understand what's going on, and then let's address it.
Do you think there's a need to grow fertilizer markets domestically and manufacturing here, especially with global conflicts we're seeing?
Yeah, I think that, generally speaking, we should always be looking at supply chains and especially critically important supply chains, and inputs have been very challenging. There's multiple effects of, we've got inflation that had been driving up fertilizer in particular. This is not something that just arrived this past year. I think we've been on this trend line, but obviously a disruption somewhere in the world causes you to say, wait a minute, let's understand this, and then what can be done. I actually appreciate Secretary Rollins and the team at USDA has really been focused on this in trying to streamline or trying to advance some of these projects in a way that you can look at some of these critical supply chains. I think this also is an opportunity to look at things like better nutrient management. Those are things that we've actually addressed through research at Iowa State, launching a new tool, InFact, which is helping farmers optimize their nutrient usage, right? So if the cost is up and supplies are limited, you need to be looking at how do you better optimize. And I think there's an opportunity for innovation here too, with biological products and those types of things. And I think it's just causing a lot of folks to take a second look at things, and that's good. So we should want to know and understand and try to build those supply chains closer to home. But I think we should also recognize that it's an opportunity for innovation also here in how we're using nutrients and nutrient management as well.
Question about, obviously there are a lot of incentives for doing conservation practices for crops such as field, but how do you feel about linking financial incentives with results, doing some sort of measurement to see if farmers are able to decrease loads into waterways?
Well, we do track. So something that I think we need to be reminded of, and this is not true in every state, and that is throughout the Mississippi River Basin, the Gulf Hypoxia Task Force that I'm co-chair of. Every state in that region has their own nutrient reduction strategy. But something that Iowa did that not every state did was we started with a science assessment. And that was that, if we're going to look, let's just take cover crops. And the science tells us that if you plant an acre of cover crops, you're going to see a 30% reduction in nitrogen and phosphorus loss. Science tells us that. And we can better refine that. We're always looking at that. A nitrate reducing wetland will deliver between 50 and 90% nitrate reduction. So we've got the science that tells us, frankly, that's the legislature, when they funded this work, said you can only fund practices that show a corresponding nutrient reduction. I say all that to say that when you have an acre of cover crops that gets planted, you can record a corresponding nutrient reduction. And there's monitoring that goes with that. We do have monitoring in the state of Iowa. In fact, we increased funding for water monitoring this last legislative session as a part of the Farm to Faucet legislative package. And so it's both measuring that load reduction and monitoring as well that we can do. So that's all the work that we do in the nutrient reduction strategy is based on the fact that we know that there's a corresponding nutrient reduction with that investment, that practice being adopted and that's how we can have confidence that we are seeing less nutrient loss.
What would you say to farmers who are maybe concerned about facing a second farm crisis?
Well, I do get asked frequently about how does this, I told you I grew up in the 1980s farm crisis, and things are quite different now. What I think so a lot of lessons learned about lending and that sort of thing that I think we're still benefiting from, how not going through those same types of mistakes or same situation. And so there's profitability is really a challenge, and beef industry is really sort of an exception to that, but with a huge caveat, and that being that you're putting significantly more capital at risk to try to return the same, trying to achieve the same return. So profitability for the last now 3 years has been a real challenge. It's not one thing that solves that. I wish it was. It's about input prices being high. It's about needing to continue to have markets and expand markets and diversified marketplace. And then it's about making sure we've got policy certainty in the middle of farm bills and around access to E15 and trade policy. All of that contributes to return to profitability and ensuring that we don't find ourselves in another crisis situation that comes anything close to the farm crisis of the 1980s. So I think there's a lot of concern and there's a lot of frustration out there about the fact that we need to see progress on all those fronts.
Should Iowans who have, whether it's cancer, Parkinson's, birth defects, and they feel that that's related to exposure to some chemical, should they be able to sue to recover damages from the companies that manufacture those chemicals?
Laura, I know where you are on this race in particular, and your efforts around my opponent. Nobody that I'm hearing from is talking about blanket immunity for companies providing these products, and so that's just it's a completely unreasonable setup to think that that's something that people are asking for.
But should people be able to sue in that circumstance?
They can.
So a lot of the problems that farmers are facing right now are tied to the Trump tariffs. Are farmers, are they getting a little frustrated? Now we're talking about $11 billion more on top of the $12 billion.
Well, a lot. I don't know. Let's. Is it a contributing factor? It is. And the administration it acknowledges that because of the fact that they're paying, they have made payments to farmers. So look, I think you talk to, and I talked extensively to farmers who say they get the concept of there's been a lot of unfairness in trade relationships. China in particular is one of those where we were not dealt with fairly, and so there has to be something to compel negotiations and creating new trade agreements and frameworks. The previous administration, the Biden administration, pursued no new trade agreements. The Trump administration is literally negotiating on a couple dozen additional ones. And some of those we don't have details yet. Some we do, and there's a lot of work in progress. So I think that again, what I continue to hear from folks is as long as they know or believe that the pain that comes with disruption through tariffs leads to something better in terms of expanded markets, a more diversified trade portfolio, dealing with some of these trade barriers, then that can work with. But there's no doubt that there's an impact. And uncertainty, right, is the thing that, whether it's policy or trade relationships, can be challenging.
Do you support another $11 billion for?
Unfortunately, none of us want to be in a situation where payments are needed, but I think the marketplace and the way the profitability has played out the last couple of years indicates yes, there's need for additional support. Well, and again, not just that, but farm bills and year-round access to E15. Those are things that help. Thank you.
Thank you.